I'll switch for the winter.
We had that discussion earlier.
We also had that discussion.
Your man did not tell you that.
Pretty much.
We'll talk to her, don't worry, we'll warn her.
Looks like moderate rain all morning Thursday morning.
Straight through all day, all like.
Only in the high 40s. Good football weather if you're on the field, but not to watch.
Okay, it's 6:30 on Monday, November 25th, and we'll call this meeting, special meeting of the Finance Committee to order. We do have a quorum, missing Mr. Pia, but everybody else is here. So I'll take a motion to start with acceptance of minutes from the June 12th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will move on to items for discussion and possible action, the budget transfers. I'm gonna start by reading the first budget proposal, Pam, and then give you a chance to. So the first proposed budget transfer, number 1, is the transfer of the available balance from the summer program and salary from unfilled behavioral analyst position to clinical costs. So the total budget transfer amount is $252,305.61.
I'll make a motion to approve.
In a second,
Second.
any discussion? Okay, I'm gonna give Pam a second to explain it to everybody.
That would need the discussion.
Yes.
Primarily, what you have before you is what I've referred to with all of these transfers, more or less housekeeping. And what had happened is when our summer program ended, and we did have a BCBA analyst that resigned. In addition, there were a number of ETs that we weren't able to fill within our own employees as a district, so we did have to contract out. So we took the funding that was available in those 2 salary lines, and our ask is that you allow us to move that over to the clinical costs line, which we will talk about a little bit later. It will be in deficit, so this will help offset that.
Any questions for Pam? Yeah.
Clarify real quick, Ms. Jill. So the clinical cost meeting, like, so if we can't, for instance, we can't hire a specialist kind of position like a BCBA or a physical therapist, or like, this is to pay out the, I mean, I know who we use, but like, to pay out the company that
Right.
supplies us.
To
Okay.
pay
Contracted
vendors,
Yes.
we have to take
Yes.
it out of the correct account, which goes by object code, which is
Okay.
why we're putting it into a professional services account instead of salaries.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Fabian?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrick?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Cormier?
Yes.
Ms. D'Angelo Powers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so motion passes unanimously. We will move on to, Mr. Brandon, I'm sorry.
I'll vote yes too.
Okay. Sorry. You're quiet over there. Yeah, he's all by himself. Okay, the second budget transfer we're discussing is a budget transfer for an athletic trainer contracted services account to a salary account for a newly hired athletic trainer at Stratford High School. The total budget transfer amount is $68,000. Take a motion.
Motion to approve.
No second.
Motion by Mr. Hendrick, second by Mr. O'Brien. Ms. Mangini, would you like to add into that?
Yeah, I'm actually happy to, particularly with this one. Again, it's housekeeping. We're moving funding that we had in our professional services account, a 300 object code, to salaries, which is a 1,000 object code. And the reason for this is, like many school districts throughout the state, we have contracted this service, but there is a real shortage of athletic trainers, so the company actually struggled and told us earlier on in the summer that they weren't very optimistic they were going to be able to fulfill their contract by providing us with a trainer for both high schools. So ultimately, what we ended up doing was allowing each of the high schools to go ahead and try to hire. Stratford High School was successful. They did hire an individual who's now our employee, but now didn't have the luck. But they did find ultimately, I think right before school started, like a week before, a contractor that was able to provide us an athletic trainer. So you will see one athletic trainer still expensed to the professional service account, and now we're moving this funding with your approval to a salary account for the second athletic trainer.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Mangini? Mr. Hunter?
So it shows it as an even swap. Is the contracted price the same as the higher price?
Yeah, we were fortunate, and we tried to live within what our budget was, and we were fortunate enough to be able to do that.
But now was able to hire for the 68,000 contract?
We're hoping it stays within that range because it will fluctuate a little. It's set at that amount, but it could be a little bit more or less if they don't work the schedule.
So it's based on scheduling?
Somewhat, yes. There is a contract and it is a set amount, but obviously if they don't fulfill it or they don't show up for something, which we hope doesn't happen because obviously we want the athletic trainers there, then we would have some savings.
And then Stratford High would be a start to finish type job. There's no
There are
variations, yeah.
So we set their schedule and control how they're working.
Great, thank you.
Is that full FTE?
Pretty close. They don't really know what their hours are. I can find out for sure for you.
Just any more questions for Ms. Mangini on budget transfer number 2? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. I'll start with Mr. Brandon this time.
Yes.
Ms. Garfield?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Henrik?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Cormier?
Yes.
Ms. D'Angelo Powers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the motion passes unanimously. On to budget transfer number 3. Budget transfer number 3 is transfer budgets with object 111 to adjust for retirements, resignations. I think it's supposed to be within object 111. To adjust for retirements, resignations, new hires, transfers, and salary reclassification adjustments. The total budget transfer amount is $771,171.68. Make a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Mr. Henrik, second by Mr. Kennedy. Any discussion? Let's start with Pam before we.
Okay, first of all, you haven't seen this kind of a transfer from salaries in quite some time, because you did make those adjustments to our transfer policy a couple of years ago. So we can do everything up to $100,000, but this is a result of a lot of the movement that occurred from when we put the budget together and presented it to you back in February, and all the various changes we made during the budget process, the reductions, when we reassess. There's always a few that we're doing internally when we're reassessing our classrooms, and sometimes we closed the 4th grade here, but we needed it at another school, or we closed the 2nd grade at a school and needed to add a 3rd grade. We normally don't make most of these adjustments until everything is settled. So that's primarily what you're seeing. You'll see transfer froms mostly represent either reduction in classrooms, some new positions that filled, and we hired that person at a lower salary than the previous person, so there's some savings. Also teacher transfers. We did have a lot of transfers early in the school year and before the end of last school year. So those just sometimes the money shifting from one school to another. So that's primarily where the transfer from categories are, and the transfer tos are alternately a teacher's reclass. We've added the classrooms in another location based on where we closed in the other area of the transfer from. So for all of those reasons, we're really just bringing this to you for housekeeping, so as we roll everything over to the new database for fiscal year '26, we're starting at the right place.
Any questions for Ms. Mangini? Mr. Hendrick?
So 771, 171, 68, it's, I'm guessing impossible if the two are identical in the sense that there's an even trade. Is the 771 what's left over and we just applied it to the other one? Is there a deficit or a surplus?
That's a totally even.
Yeah.
I'm not following what you're.
Well, they're
asking.
exactly the same numbers.
Well, whenever we do a transfer, debits and credits have to be, so in order to submit to you, this is cleaning up all those big accounts that we need to move money
Right.
to.
So we
There's
put-
still
we put-
monies available.
So that we pulled 771, 171, 68 to cover the 771, and then there's still a surplus in that transfer from area, or is it the other way around?
There will still be monies available in the transfer from.
Okay.
Because the 771 is making all the transfer to accounts
Yep.
no longer in deficit.
It's balancing it with.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. Brandon, I don't want to leave you alone up there on that one. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Brandon?
Yes.
Ms. Carol Fabian?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Henrik?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Cormier?
Yes.
Ms. Daniel Powers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion passes unanimously. So those are all our budget transfers. Thank you, Pam, for those.
Thank you.
Let's move on to all the financial reports from Ms. Mangini.
Okay. The first financial report you have is our monthly for the month of October. And you will see for the most part, while we are in the process of further analyzing salary, budget, and benefit budget areas due to the position vacancies and some late hires, at this point, we are in pretty good shape. We have the majority of our certified positions filled, which I'm sure you see in the monthly personnel report. We are still struggling with some of our non-certified positions, specifically our CIA positions, and even custodial and climate specialists. They kind of end up with vacancies, or people are still coming and going a bit more than we would like to see. So we're watching those areas carefully. In addition, we wanted to make you aware, while it's not reflected here, when you see the budget report next month, we are working through some concerns with regard to our sped budget, particularly when it comes to our contracted services accounts, our clinical costs. We're actually really analyzing it right now. We're just trying to get our hands around it. We do think it's going to be a significant deficit based on our in-service needs or in-district needs, and I will certainly let Heather during her report talk about that more, but quite frankly, I think we have to keep in mind when we do a really great job about potentially not outplacing our students and able to service them appropriately here, sometimes that results in costing us more money for our in-district services. So she, of course, Heather can do a much better job describing all of that. But nevertheless, we just want to give you a heads up on that. Heather's office and mine have been working very closely together over the last couple of weeks to find every way possible to mitigate and control that potential deficit, because added to that, as you'll recall from last month, we are anticipating a significant deficit in utilities, and particularly in electricity, and that was due to that PURA tax that initially did not go through. We were all celebrating last year because we had money left in our budget for utilities, and we decided to reduce it on the advice of DBS. And now it hit, and it's going to be significant. So we're watching that as well. And as I said, we're doing all we can to control it, mitigate it, and watch all our other expenses. So we should have a much better report for you when we look at the November financials.
Okay. Start with any questions for Ms. Mangini in the financial report.
seeing any benefit from the solar? It's on just about all the schools now.
We are definitely seeing some. I haven't talked to Chris Tamiak recently, but I always comment that he guided me about a year and a half ago to be very careful to be too aggressive taking those anticipated savings. Because I do believe that we are seeing savings. I just don't think they're quite where they thought they would be, but definite savings.
I have a quick question. I know there was a few boiler replacements over the past couple of years and things like that. Some of the school buildings are insanely hot, and some of them are a little bit cooler. I think it has to do with probably the age of the buildings and so forth. But there are rules around, through the state, there are rules around the temperatures and things like that, and I'm kind of just putting this out there for the public, because there are rules around the temperatures that have to be set for it. Do you know what those are off the top of your head?
I do not.
Okay.
I just do know, I will say that I do know that Mr. Ruggiero works very closely with his counterpart over at the town to
Yeah.
address all our HVAC concerns. And I know that they're in constant communication. And yes, we definitely have our share of issues because of our aging buildings, but also some improvements that we need to have done to HVAC systems that we are working collaboratively with the town on.
Maybe at our next meeting, Mr. Ruggiero would be willing to kind of give us a heads up on what needs to be done in some of the buildings and before we jump into budget next year, and what those temperatures are maybe.
We can email those to you as well.
That would be
I have a
good.
rough guess, but I'm not gonna put it out there because I don't wanna be wrong, so let me just email
I
those
know,
to you.
I know there's a statute out there that governs very specifically what it has to be at, but
Yeah.
and it's like 68 degrees and 67 degrees, and if it's this degree outside, whatever it is, but I know it's very particular.
We
So
can definitely have Mr. Ruggiero join us next
that would be great.
finance meeting.
Any further questions for Ms. Mangini? Okay, then we'll move on to the grants report.
Okay, we did provide you with an updated grant report through October, and you will see my asterisk for both Title I and Title II. While we did receive our award amount, our budget had not yet been officially approved by the state, and I'm sure that will happen any day. However, we just want you to be aware of that. And if you look at the grant end dates, you'll see that all the grants that were either have already expired or are coming up, we have been diligent and we have utilized all those funds.
Any questions on the grants report? Yes.
So the carryovers, are they unspent dollar amounts, or are they just, is that just how we?
Carryover on the entitlement grants, the title grants, all the title grants, all the IDEA grants are common. They're something that you actually are counting on because the timing of those grants are such that we really don't see those dollars until September, October for IDEA, and then for title, we actually don't get the dollars until December, January, so we count on the carryover to do just that, to pay for those salaries and those programs that you have costs associated with them for August, September, October.
And new grants as of the start of the year. I've heard that we've received some grants, do you know?
Do you want me to
which ones are
say a
the-
little
Haven't
bit?
had that.
They'll be in your next month's report, but yes, we just found out Saturday morning that we received the 21st Century Grant for the middle schools. Unfortunately, the high schools did not. And we did also receive another federal stop grant, which is called Project Inspire, helping us continue our current project Uplift and expand down to 5th and 6th grade, and that is a $1 million grant. And in addition, we also, which you'll hear at the board tonight, we also received a special grant to basically thank your teachers, and that is called the Mary L. Fitch Trust Grant. And so we received $10,000 to do something special for our teachers during a non-celebratory time of year.
And so the 21st century, is the 21st century grant?
The middle school 21st Century Grant, it's an after-school
Right.
grant. We've been doing 21st Century for, I don't know how many years now,
At least 5.
at least 5 years, both at middle and high school. They said the grant was going to be more competitive this year because more schools were trying to do it. We worked with our community partners, we got the grant in, and they decided that we could have the grant for middle school but not for high school.
So the dollar amount here would be for this year and then that for next year?
Yes.
Okay.
So
And-
next month, you'll have those new grants on there.
And then how would we address that lost grant in the positions?
Seems to be something that is to be determined.
Yeah, right now, our high schools are hoping to, petition to the state and join us working on things. People are sad, it's gone. It was a great program, but the state was very clear that, they had X amount of grants to give out and they had double the applicants that they've had in the past. So I think they did the best they could to even it out. So we just found out Saturday. We really haven't had time to plan to not have it at the high school, but as soon
That is
as we
for
know,
next
we'll know.
year.
That's this year.
This year's.
And the $98,000 in the budget for it is what we expected or what we had?
Now I need to clarify that,
Yeah.
that is not the amount of the 21st century, that was an additional for the ARP Act. Those grants are all gone. 21st century is separate through the state, and had nothing to do with the American Rescue Plan Act grants. So the dollar amounts aren't on here, and off the top of my head, I can't.
It was over 200,000 for our middle schools. And then the federal stop grant was just a little bit over $1 million. And then the other Fitch grant was $10,000. So some good work.
Are there any other large material changes in grants coming up that we anticipate, or do we?
No.
No.
That we know of, and we also, we do know that the middle school 21st century does not, I believe, as of this morning, Joanna had mentioned that it did not have the same match that we were required to budget for with that 5-year previous 21st century, because that did add almost $200,000 to our budget for the final year, so, hopefully, well, at least have that to go forward with the middle schools.
And do we know what type of programs we were intending to fund through that?
The 21st century, it is a program.
It is.
Yeah.
its own-
Yeah, it's still a program.
And what do they do?
You learn leadership skills and you work with, we work with Empower, which is a company that comes in to, include both students with exceptionalities and your typical peers, and you work on the leadership skills of your current students. There's a component of studying and after-school help and homework help. So there's a lot of different pieces to it, and I'm happy to send the board the description of it.
What was the description?
I think there is.
Yeah, Mr. Brenner.
The Alliance grant, we've encumbered like just under 4.2 million, so there's 876,000 left. Is that just because we haven't?
Filled all our positions.
And also it's benefit costs that we take out periodically, so we do them quarterly.
Okay, thanks.
Even though you know they're coming, you don't encumber them?
Because each individual person takes a different, health insurance, so we wait for the Anthem bill, because there's always changes, and then we just, take that funding every quarter.
If there's no other questions, we'll move on to the special education report. I'm not sure who's gonna take that.
That's me.
You're
Yep.
gonna take that.
And Carol,
So just, for context, Ms. Mangini is absolutely correct. Next month, you're gonna see a deficit in your clinical cost account. Right now, you don't see that yet, but you will. Context, just so you're aware, we have 1,369 students currently being serviced with exceptionalities. At this time last year, when I presented to you, we had 1,288. That's a difference of 81 students. So that's a combination of students that returned from outplacements, students that were newly identified, and students that moved into district. When you're talking about 81 students, you're talking about a significant increase in your costs, especially if these students are part of one of our programs. So if a student is not outplaced, they're often a part of our programs. That has increased our clinical cost, which is why you're going to see a decrease in that account to a negative amount, okay? In addition, that's why you already see that we are negative for transportation. When you are transporting an additional 81 students, it is going to cost you for transportation. Now, these are things that, although every year when we do the budget, I always put in a couple extra outplacements, or I try to increase a clinical cost, but it usually ends up getting knocked down because you can only plan for what you have, not what you think you might have. So when things shift and change, the costs are gonna shift and change. Okay, so we are working very hard right now. We don't wanna do anything drastic, like take away the tuition money, because in January every year, we have students that move in that are outplaced. And so you need to be careful with how we do that. So right now, we are working diligently, we are monitoring, we are adjusting, we are talking to the companies about what they can do to help support us. And we'll continue to report to you on those aspects, but you can see the large reason is just that at this time this year, we have a larger number of students identified. That is not necessarily a bad thing. We are in line with the state. The state has also increased the number of students that are identified. They are pushing 18% of students within the whole state that are identified, and that's kind of where we're headed in Stratford too. So that's just to give you a little bit more of a clear picture. The rest of the accounts right now are trending on schedule as planned, and I appreciate your patience because I did have a new financial secretary, so it took her a little while to learn how to do this. So I appreciate your patience in getting that this month, and she is doing a fantastic job.
Any questions for Ms. Borges? Mr. Hendrick?
So we are trending at 6 less out of district placements at this time from October, so.
They're here.
Yeah, but I mean, that's still, I would think,
Yes.
creates some type of savings in the long run.
Yes.
Thanks.
The intent is to create savings in the long run.
More
Well,
expensive for our district
We
placement.
should probably point out, however, that a lot of the tuitions increased way more than we anticipated
It did.
this year. And some of them informed us very late.
They did. And I'll be sharing a letter shortly with the Board of Ed that I'll be sending to our legislators to talk about just that. Because we really, the state really needs to step in and start to put a cap on what they are allowed to increase and what they charge. Because it's for every district, just really difficult. We anticipate, when I budget and I send my budget to you, my budget is a 3 to 4% increase. When you then receive something in September that shows you a 14% increase, that's not something you can plan for. And their reasoning is always, we needed more staff, we needed to service the kids better. They always have, their reason. But the companies that are state-approved out-of-district placements, the prices are just really getting too high.
No, just a side note, you were speaking at the CABE conference about some of the special education costs and things like that. What was the reaction there from
Well,
various?
first, yes, I was speaking there, and I want to say thank you to our board members who came to support me. It was very kind. It was more about how to build in-district capacity, right? So the conversations, and we need support from the state to do that. If the state would start to cap those costs and then repurpose those dollars to give it to districts to build their in-district programs, you're building your in-district capacity, you're servicing your students better, and it's a better way to spend your money from the state. So that's kind of what we were trying to showcase, myself and another district. We're showcasing how you can build your in-district programs. Our board has been very supportive of that. Our programs have grown. We have added ABA classrooms every year. We have added steps at each school. We've added bridges at each school. Our Strive program has now doubled in size. So this board has been very supportive of increasing those in-district programs, but what we need is we need the state to step on board to help us build capacity in district and start capping the cost of out-of-district placements.
Any questions? Moving right along then, the food services report, Ms. Mangini?
Yes, we have provided you with a monthly report for July, August, and September. And you will see that we continue to trend favorably with our food service program financials. However, we still do have a concern with the unpaid meal charges. We are probably, if we continue to trend as we have over the last few months, we will be over $100,000. I have reached out to schools, and while their hands are tied on how much they can do to try to collect these unpaid meals, they really have done a great job trying to reach out to the families, because our concern is always if some of these families are entitled to free and or reduced meals, that they should be filling out an application, and we're trying to help families understand that. So we have been working together with both our partners at Sodexo as well as all of our building administrators, and we're doing the best we can. I will add that I was at a CASBO workshop not too long ago, and there were state representatives from the Child Nutrition Office there, and they heard all of the school business officials' frustration loud and clear over the situation, and it really is a legislative issue. So we too are hoping to do some lobbying and trying to get our state legislators to recognize that the newest legislation has tied the hands of districts in trying to collect funds, and it's really hurting a lot of our programs.
Now, I don't remember whether it was last year or the year before, they let us use part of that balance.
It was last.
It was last year
Yes,
to.
one time.
Yeah, okay, so it was a one-time thing,
So
we're not
far.
sure if they're going to do that this year?
Correct.
Any questions on the food services report?
One of the things, just a comment, one of the things we did try to do during the policy committee was to look at ways to address that. Basically, the solution was, there is no solution.
I agree.
Look at a number of things, a number of our policies, number of language, the state law and statutes, and realize that there's really not a whole lot we can do outside of encouraging families to, who are entitled to, right? So that would help.
Exactly. That's what we're all trying to do in schools, and everyone in them.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the enrollment report as of November 1.
Yes, primarily you'll see that under our in-district subtotal, we have increased by about 21 students since you received the October 1st report, and those increases were primarily at the high school level.
But we are down in total enrollment for the year from last year.
From last year, that's correct.
Correct.
You remember Benel had a very large graduating class last year? That's why their numbers are down, so they're accounting for that.
Any questions on the enrollment report? No? Okay, move on to other business. Any other business anybody wants to discuss? I have a couple of things, but what do you want first?
Any
Go ahead,
questions?
Ms. Gilligan.
I know, originally in our October agenda for finance before it was canceled, there was talk of athletic budget.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. I was just curious when that would happen.
So I think there were some questions around the athletic budget, and I know Penny and I spoke about it a little bit, around the accounting for the athletic budgets of the schools, and fundraising, how fundraising works and moves to that athletic budget, and how the athletic budget is divvied up among sports, so to say. You know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Actually, Sean had also mentioned that during the athletic review committee, this was discussed. And I can assure you of a couple of things in talking with our athletic directors, that we definitely budget for new uniforms, and they sent me some notes that say every 4 years, and this is what they presented to the athletic review committee. So each team gets new uniforms every 4 years. The only time that they fundraise for uniforms is when they want some special clothing. And they gave examples such as pink out for breast cancer awareness, or light blue jerseys for prostate cancer awareness, that type of thing. Whenever fundraising is done, and because we are so involved right now, my office with all the schools with their student activity funds reviews, they most definitely have separate accounts for every single sport. So if football is doing fundraising, it goes to the football accounts. If cross-country is doing it, it goes to cross-country cheerleading. And even at the elementary level, they're doing fundraising for specific field trips or class trips. Everything is kept separately. And we are setting up we've had a newer software system for our student activity funds because Quicken has kind of been such an old version that we've had to update it. And this will allow us better accessibility to the information. And right now, we'll pop in, we'll look, and we'll have them send us monthly reports. But this will give us the opportunity to actually log in and check what they're doing. But I have to tell you, I have spent a lot of time particularly at the high school level, but I've talked to the middle schools and the elementary schools, and I'm pretty comfortable that they are doing a really good job against these funds. And with regard to how our athletic directors are budgeting within the general operating, I personally am pretty comfortable that they are doing a good job and they're staying on top of the needs as best they can. Don't forget, we have reduced their budgets, but the years that we've reduced them, a couple of years that we had year-end balances, we've also allowed them to order things to support them as well. So we're doing our best, and I think they're comfortable with what they have.
Mr. Brennan, anything to add? Ms. Fabian, anything you want to ask further?
No, Sean and I asked several questions during the athletic review meeting regarding that.
Okay. Just following up on that, during our last board meeting, there was a speaker that asked about some after-school activities at the middle school level that weren't happening and they were anticipated to be happening. Is there an update on that?
Yep. We can tag team if I forget something.
Tag team.
So each of the middle schools and the high schools are able to run their affinity groups. It was specifically regarding the student affinity groups. They are all running. We were able to divvy up money so that they could pay for an advisor to run their men of color, their pinky, their living in color, their student unions. So each administrator received X dollar amount. We did cap it so that everybody is getting $1,500, so not one person getting more, one getting less. We said everyone should be getting the same amount to run their clubs and committees, but both middle schools and high schools are able to run those. And that was a little bit of alliance, a little bit of increasing educator diversity. The state allowed us, because we run those groups for staff, and because that is a retention tactic, the state allowed us to use increasing educator diversity grant money in order to use it for our students as well.
So the high school groups like that, stipends are being paid
Yes.
now.
Yes.
Any further questions regarding?
And again, great work by Joanna with the grants, because I have to tell you, she has been phenomenal. So she was the one who originally wrote to the state to say, are we able to use our increasing educator diversity to expand our student groups, because it's a retention tool for our staff? And they said yes.
Great. Okay. Any other questions? No? Mr. Henry?
So the budget prep package, is that just something for us to read? Is it?
It's just informational. We send this to all of the principals, all the schools, department heads every year, and we just wanted you to be aware of what they're receiving.
They're not submitting anything until the end of this week or middle of this week.
Wednesday. Well, they've been submitting, it's just the deadline is Wednesday.
Okay.
Thank you for that information.
Mhm.
Okay. There's no further questions. Take a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?